Morning, Kyle.
Good morning, Dan.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing? We're here with another Be the Exception episode.
Hell yeah.
What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about CrossFit season and how it's going back to the sanctional-esque type format, I guess.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
So what does that mean, genuinely, with how checked out I am, as everybody else knows on these episodes I'm on? What does that entirely mean? Because I remember it to a degree.
What do you remember about sanctionals?
Well, you had to qualify to go there, and then if you at a certain point within the Open, I think, you had to hit a certain spot to qualify to go there, and if you won the sanctional or got top two, you qualified for the games. And then if you were at a point in the Open and you were in within a placement to go to the games or whatever,
they backfilled the spot from
exactly.
there.
Yes, yeah, that's what I remember. So I remember seeing shit throughout the year, and I think that's how Griffin qualified for the games in 2020. He won the Norway one. Yep.
Yeah.
So other than that, that's about it, man. I remember more of the regional side of shit because that structure made sense.
Very linear structure. Yeah. So essentially, they're trying to combine all of the things that they've done in the past now. So it's like a sanctional format to old regional style format to old previous iteration, most recent previous iteration of semifinal format. They're trying to combine all of it together, and what ends up happening is over basically from February till I think the last one is in June with NorCal Classic, and NorCal had a qualifying event, so maybe until from January till June, 6-month period. You're basically running competitions to try and qualify for the games.
January to June.
Yep, 6 months.
Instead of, what was it, like October until
Sanctionals
the end
was
of the
Open?
Open?
Sanctionals was a little bit more intense because it was an 11-month season.
Yeah.
Where it was October until, or maybe a 10-month where it was October till the games. And then I think it actually was 11-month because Dubai had a competition.
Yeah, that's right.
The month after the games. So it's not as intense, and it is like a little bit of a combo thing. But what is kind of the big overarching principle of what's going on right now is they have the ability to compete basically every weekend for a 3-month period. I think from April till June, you basically can compete every single weekend. Also, I think that's extrapolated a little bit more just because World Fitness Project is now thrown in there as well.
Yeah, and people doing high rocks just for the fuck of it, too.
Just for the fuck of it, which is, as we had Leon on, it's a little bit more damaging than people think. So,
don't know how I feel about the ability to compete every weekend, but I mean, you have to be smart and diligent with what you're doing.
Right, which is kind of so this is kind of why I wanted to have the podcast partially.
Yeah.
Right? And then I think we wanted to get into talking about why it's a little bit more challenging for non-professional athletes to set up a season structure than it is professional athletes. And I would call people who are qualifying for semifinals as of right now non-professional athletes.
People not qualifying for semifinals?
Qualifying for
people
semifinals.
Qualifying for semifinals. Okay.
Because they're not getting paid. So they're also working a job, which I think is something we can get into. But yeah,
so like every Olympian, essentially.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the big thing was just like how to set up a season structure and why it's just not intelligent to compete every single weekend, even though you have the opportunity to.
You could honestly see January to June. Right?
Yeah, so there's a
what's the 3-month gap you're saying you can compete every weekend, like from April to June?
Essentially from April to June, and this isn't everybody can do it, but there is a possibility. So like
right?
they had Mayhem Classic, and then like a week after that they had in affiliate semifinals. Then there was World Fitness Project. Then there was.
But you can't make sanctions or anything via World Fitness Project, correct?
Correct. I'm just saying there's a lot.
That's just for clarification for those
correct.
listening.
Yep. Yeah. But I mean, you could go Mayhem Classic, in affiliate semifinals, TFX, and that's 3 weekends. That's 6 weekends, or what was that? 5 weekends. So you're competing 3 times in a month period, basically.
Oh my god!
So it's a lot, right? And then you could do NorCal Classic as well. So you could have
That's all in 1 month.
NorCal's at the end of the month, so that would be a 6-month period, I believe.
6 month or 6
6 weeks, sorry, 6-week period. So you
have
so you have 4 competitions, I believe, in around a 6-week period. Yeah.
Wow.
Is it? Yeah. So mathing it out, that's essentially what it comes out to for kind of like the old sanctional purposes.
Well, okay, so thinking about it, and this could be.
Also, sorry,
you're fine. Go ahead.
I just remembered this. That's for the U.S., but watching some of the French Throwdown, Luke Parker was out at the French Throwdown
Really? Luke P?
Luke P. So I don't know how he qualified for it because I didn't understand their qualification process. But all these other events that they have as qualifying processes for the games, it appears that other people can go, that American athletes can go and compete at these as well.
I mean, why not? That's more money.
Yeah, maybe from sponsorships.
Well, I mean, more money from the standpoint of like having another athlete be there, paying to be there, or their sponsorship paying to be there to help them run the event.
What's interesting is you have to live in the States to compete at Syndicate and TFX. So
interesting.
Yeah. So
maybe Luke has dual citizenship.
Maybe he has dual citizenship in Europe. Yeah. I don't know. I just saw him out at the French Throwdown, so there's the ability, it appears, to go and compete out there as well. And I think that one was a week before TFX.
So that would be
that 5 and 6 week period.
5.
Yeah.
At least get a week break.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think the French Throwdown was the same weekend as World Fitness Project, but I might be getting the dates all wrong here.
Well, either way, the fact of the matter is theoretically speaking now with Luke P being at that French one, there are at least 5.
In, I believe, roughly a 6-week period. Let's see when Mayhem was. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So looking at it from a... this might be too quick of a segue into the next little bit of season structure, et cetera. Maybe we can circle back to it. But looking at it through the swimming lens, there's a 4-week period, maybe 6-week, depending on how muscle bound you are.
So maybe it was an 8-week period.
8-week period?
Yeah.
Let's just call it 6 or 8 week, or 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, Mayhem was on the 5th and the 6th, so 8-week period still.
So either way, like this reminds me of like my high school swim season in Indiana. High school swim season in Indiana is taken very, very seriously. For guys, it starts like the last week of October or first week of November, and it ends. At least when I was in high school, it ended the week after Valentine's Day. So that's only
4 months, about 3 to 4.
4 months, but like 3 months of training.
Yeah, one month of competing.
Yeah. But like there's dual meets and shit like within like. So I would view this personally. This makes a lot of sense to me because you got the 6-week qualification period, and if you train it correctly, you could like build into that like last one because you're getting all your training done. And you're hitting all your quote unquote goats or whatever outside of that 6 to 8 week period, to where you could just like the first match get your yips great talk. The first weekend competition get your yips out. You know what I mean? And then the next one, okay, this didn't work. We can test something here the following week. Obviously, maybe a day or two rest. But there's a potential. You correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm viewing it via the swimming lens.
Yeah.
If we had a swim meet every weekend, or at least 3 weeks in a row, swim meet, 1 week off, championship time.
Yeah.
That can happen.
Yeah.
It's very possible. But damn, you got to be on it. You got to be on the algorithm outside of that 2 months.
Yeah.
Like the other 10 months outside of that
you have to be dialed in.
Really dialed the fuck in.
You're not doing like maybe open qualification processes to get to in affiliate semifinals for 3 weeks type thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Or doing an online qualifier in January to try and make it to one of these qualifiers and then competing in
You
in
essentially,
the fall.
if you want to go that route, you're training through that,
Right.
which would be fucking nuts.
Yeah.
To be able to achieve that.
Right. Which I think professional athletes can accomplish that.
Yes.
It's doable.
Yes.
Right. They're more than likely just going to walk through the open and get to some of these qualifying events, no problem. This is more geared towards like that bubble semis, or their goal is to just go and compete at semis. That's what this podcast is geared towards, because when I'm looking at this and then thinking about some of the back end stuff of like you're doing the open, maybe you tried out for the World Fitness Project competition or online qualifier during that time frame. I understand World Fitness Project might not be like a thing in the future, but it's at least likely for the next 3 years it's going to be in the season format of some sort for a lot of people. So there's a lot that's happening now inside of a very short period of time. On top of that, in the past, it's traditionally been the fall time frame where you like do a qualifier to get your touch-up season comp in that January, February time frame before you go into the open. So that the yips comp that you were talking about should usually be happening in January, February.
Okay.
When you have that time period off to be able to figure out what some of your weaknesses are,
It's
and
like
then taper
Wadapalooza,
in. Right.
Fitness of the Coast.
Because I think, who's the guy that wrote the progression book or the textbook, Tudor de Papa or something like that? Do you know what I'm
Tudor Bumpa, yeah.
Yeah.
Periodization.
Periodization, yeah. Sorry. In that book, really good textbook if you've not picked it up. But in that, he kind of talks about how there's, at most, you can really peak, which is what you should be doing if you're trying to qualify for the games or compete at one of these semifinals, for 3 competitions throughout the year.
Right.
That's like the most you can do.
Right.
And in reality, it should be about 2.
Yeah.
But there are competitions that you can go to that you can use as kind of like tune-ups and learning experiences, which might be some of the, like a beach brawl. Not to say that beach brawl isn't a great competition, but that can be used as kind of like hey, we're just going to go see how kind of some of the off-season training went, right? And we're just going to go here. We're going to give you maybe like a deload for a week, not like an actual taper into this event. You're going to go compete, and we're going to kind of use it as a training weekend. Like you're going to go and hit 6 tough workouts, and we'll give you a couple days, easier days afterwards, and then we'll get some compensation from that because the intensity will be higher, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent there.
I think it fell right into the category,
yeah.
honestly, because so to hit on all of that, the difference is, so this podcast episode is geared towards more those who want to qualify for semis and so on.
Right.
That is, as you said, the quote unquote, we're using that as the definition for the non-pro athlete versus the pro athlete. So how can the non-pro athlete structure their shit to meet that?
Yeah. So getting into it, this is why I think that making sure that you have a good season structure, if you're trying to take this very seriously and qualify for a semifinal or do as well as you can at a semifinal, is very important. Because if you're trying to peak for, let's say, peak for TFX, and then turn around and 3 weeks later go and compete at NorCal, or 2 weeks later go and compete at NorCal, you got to you really honestly have to accept a poor performance at one or the other.
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing to do for psychotic people in the sport of fitness.
Right. right. So, like, I've been in this sport now and I've coached it for 13 years, I think now. My first open was 2011, I think. So, like, I've kind of seen the evolution of the athlete and of the sport in general. Used to be like, oh, you don't need to taper or like do any sort of periodization. Like, look at Rich. Like, he doesn't do it.
There was a time where Tudor Bumpa's book was considered like no longer applicable.
Yes, right.
And now it's like,
and then what ended up happening is sanctionals happened, and everybody was competing year round. And athletes actually got the realization that, like, I can't do this year round. I'm going to get injured or just burnt out.
Yeah.
And so you had a 1 year period where everyone was like, oh, I need to start setting up a season structure. And for like coaches, it was like, yes,
fucking finally.
Finally.
And then Cross was like, fuck you. we're gonna change it again.
We're going to change it, but also we're going to change it to something that kind of works pretty well because you have
the sanctional part.
You have quarterfinals, which all the top athletes are walking into. You do have to kind of be peaked for that one. Then you have semifinals, which you kind of have to be peaked for. The only complaint I have would be the turnaround from quarterfinals to semifinals, and that was too fast. Yeah. And then you had games if you qualify.
So you just said, as the pro, you have your season structure. You can quote unquote walk into quarterfinals, kind of peaking ish.
I would say for the pro, like the pro athlete probably doesn't need to compete.
Okay, the pro athlete doesn't need to.
They just need to worry about box step ups or some other obligatory movement that they're going to no rep that year.
Too soon? Anyway, so how then? I'll tell you what. Let's start with thinking about other sports.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with thinking.
Well, maybe we can bring it back to swimming in regards to.
Well, you guys. We're on the same page there because there are people who are quote unquote non-pro that still want to perform and qualify for like state meets. There are a wide variety of national meets now, and personally, I think it's here's your fucking participation. You qualified for national shit because there's now tiers. It doesn't make sense.
Okay.
But and there's also like there's tiered international meets as well. There are masters athletes, which is anybody over the age of 18, still trying to do really, really well compared to how they were, or still leveling up.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So what
Well, I guess like
what exactly do you want to know?
Yeah, like one question I have is like, so like you just listen to all that, right? Like you listen to like, okay, you can basically compete yourself into the ground. And I think there used to be an old adage in triathlons that you can compete yourself out of shape.
Yes.
And I think in CrossFit you can compete yourself into burnout.
So
not necessarily out of shape,
into burnout. So it's funny you say that in triathlon because there's the same shit in swimming.
Okay,
as well. You can train yourself to be out of shape.
Yeah,
but it's less out of shape. It's less burnout. It's more like just chronic fatigue.
Yeah,
and never ever allowing your because like, the buoyancy factor in the pool. You don't know this, but you're developing osteoporosis really fucking fast compared to everybody else. It's every single day it's becoming more and more difficult for you to fucking walk.
Yeah. Okay.
So continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So I guess with you guys having a 1 month period, and there is a lot of other meets throughout the year. Like, were you guys obviously weren't peaking for every single race in that month period, were you? Or
no. No.
Yeah. So how did you guys handle that and like focus on peaking for state or whatever?
Well, we had a magician as a coach when I was in high school.
Yeah.
But things have changed remarkably since then. So do you want me to hit more on when I was in high school and college, or more the modern approach?
I would both.
Okay, so back in the day, 2004, 2008, I'll say up to 2012. There was the introduction of the super suits and whatnot, and then that left quickly. So there was a performance got really, really high and then dropped down quite a bit. And during the being able to maximize, let's say 8 week instead of 6 week.
Okay.
But like that month of pure competition or quote unquote whatever, you've already had 2 weeks of hell.
Yeah.
Leading into it.
Okay.
It's 2 weeks of methodical structure, 2 weeks of a little more than 2 weeks of methodical structure, but 2 weeks of a living nightmare, and then you hitting that first meet exhausted. Now there's no qualification for it,
right?
But the goal, with how like my high school coach had to structure the program for the season, and also the wide variety of skill set, the goal was to be able to qualify, if you could, for state within that first or second meet without resting.
Okay.
Now, that being said, Indiana high school qualification standards for the state swim meet are a lot faster. It's the top 3 in the country for speed.
Yeah.
Right. We're one of the top states to get recruited for collegiate swimming, even now when it's changed entirely. But the approach was, okay, we're going to put you in your prime events because you've done all this other shit throughout the summer. If you swam year round, which I did, but didn't. I played baseball too. And we're going to see what works and what doesn't. And then from there, we're going to test. It's a test of mentality.
Okay.
If you have the mindset for the event, we'll stay in it. If you don't, we'll shift.
Okay.
We have 8 weeks. This first month is your trial period for what event you're in. We would go. This isn't how it was. We didn't have swim meets back to back to back to back every weekend. It was more like every 5 days.
Okay. Yeah.
And they were dual meets.
Right.
So we would have the guys and the girls. So there were some meets where it was like guys and girls. We got a good amount of rest between our 4 events.
Okay.
Guys' swim meets were 45 minutes long.
Yeah.
For 11 races.
Okay.
I'm sorry, for 13 races.
Right.
Really fucking quick turnaround. Right. No warm down possible. So it was ultimate training opportunity and to see what can you withstand. From that standpoint.
So let me just recap this real quick. So you had 8 weeks of hard training.
So not necessarily.
Or you had 8 weeks of training.
Yeah.
2 of them were like, we're going to kick your dick in, basically.
Yeah.
And then you would go into your first meet very fatigued and worn down.
Yeah. Hopefully not injured.
Hoping that you kind of just qualified for state on a whim type thing.
Yeah.
And then the second meet, you might be a little bit more recovered for, probably not, because you just ran a meet. And then you were hoping that you kind of qualified for state again.
Reality sets in immediately after that first meet.
Okay.
Because if your mindset wasn't ready for it, and depending on what year you were in high school, my coach Dave was going to put you in a different event.
Okay.
He wasn't going to allow you to continue to beat yourself down and get burnt out for like your prime event.
Okay.
He was going to shift your nervous system.
Okay.
And then see what develops. Like, my high school swim coach, he was lucky enough to swim for the world's greatest swim coach, Doc Councilman, during the era of this of 1958 to 1990, and then was his assistant coach after that till 1990.
Yeah.
So like all the best possible backing for the sport, he applied it.
Yeah.
Right.
So basically, you would go into the event if you were like, if you did well, from a mindset standpoint, like you came away like I can do better, or we got something to build on. I want to tackle this again, something to build on. He would keep you in that event.
Yep.
If not, he was like, "You're fucking flat. You're not going to swim 50s anymore. We're gonna put you in a longer distance event.
Find something better, or a different stroke entirely.
Yeah, or a different stroke, right? And we're just gonna get you out of the patterns and the central nervous system fatigue that you're currently in.
100%.
Okay.
And it was effective 100% of the time.
Okay. So my question, I guess, would be in regards to that: is there enough variance in CrossFit? Do you think, to allow people's central nervous systems to recover from competition weekend to competition weekend?
That's a really loaded question, right? In my opinion, with it as out of it as I have been the past few years, is it would depend on the programming.
Yeah.
From weekend to weekend.
Yeah.
Because if I feel still there's programming from competition to competition that's going to be biased in one way or another.
Well, you pretty much have one programmer for every competition, and so it's always going to have somebody's bias to it.
So I think if let's assume a constant
flatline bias. So CrossFit in general has a flatline bias of sagittal plane movements.
Yeah. So there you go. So I would say in that case, yes.
There is enough variance?
I think there would be there because...
If it were just sagittal plane bias?
I think there could be there. Now, hear me out.
Yeah.
Because then during the week, if it's at the competition, if it's not going to be different, you can change it throughout the week.
But how do you... So you're running races though, right? So how do you make sure that you're prepped for the race? Like swimming is the same thing over and over again. CrossFit, there's a lot of variation.
Theoretically, okay.
So like you're having different like one of the things about training CrossFit is like the fatigue factors in workouts, and experiencing those fatigue factors so you know how to properly race the race, right? So like if you're leaving or adjusting what you just hit the weekend before in your training to not touch that when you have similar events coming up in the following week, is it and so you're not touching these races, wouldn't you not be peaked for that competition then because you don't know exactly, or you haven't been getting your final touches on those last little bits of the race?
Dude, I'll be honest, I don't know. Like from the CrossFit standpoint, so thinking of it back in the day, and we kind of do it now with the modern style of prepping the semi-pro athlete for a high-level meet or to qualify for a high-level meet. A lot of it is placebo. Right? Well, not sorry. That's the wrong.
A little bit more like modern training now, right? Or
I'm bridging it.
Okay,
right now, because this does carry over into both. This is still applicable to both worlds.
Right.
There was an analogy used, an analogy presented to me years ago of, does a basketball player, to get better at rebounding or to increase boards or to become more effective on boards, do they train getting rebounds only all the time?
Okay.
Right? No, of course they don't. Like they still work on lateral movements or whatever,
vertical,
right? Exactly.
Hands.
So there are. I'm just going to throw myself out there. Like I strongly believe that shifting the neural focus after a sagittal only competition and then bleeding into another sagittal only competition, I do strongly believe like if you give those pathways are near complete rest for a few days, you're going to be peaked, if you will. Is that what you're saying?
Better than if you were just like, I'm going to go do a bunch of thrusters and pull-ups and deadlifts again.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like once you're done chopping the wood, it's done.
So in that sense, you would start competing yourself out of shape, though.
So
and not necessarily to burnout.
If I follow what you're saying, I will somewhat agree, but also maybe we can spark a conversation here. The heart doesn't know any difference with what you're doing. It just knows it needs to pump.
Yes, but there is also a movement efficiency component to the race that you're practicing, right?
So change my mind right now. In my mind, if it's a flat line of sagittal to sagittal, et cetera, I'm going to present the argument like, yes, there can be variance within the week of training to help you do better the following weekend without it training you out of shape.
Yeah.
And you can still change your approach.
Yeah.
How you go about, I'm trying to apply the grid approach that I have to the CrossFit approach, knowing they're wildly different.
Right. Well, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I think for a short period of time, that would work, right? If we go back to you're peaking for 3 competitions, right? And let's say those 3 competitions are back-to-back-to-back weekends, right? And you're like, this is my season. These 3 competitions are my season. How do I stay primed and fresh for 3 weeks of absolute balls-to-the-wall intensity, right? I think then, yes, you're going to prime different neural pathways going into each competition, right?
Yeah.
But if you're like trying to do all 6 of those weeks or like an 8-week period of all that, I think there's a propensity to compete yourself out of shape in the sport.
Yeah,
so like
I agree with you.
I'll use. I always hate using myself as an example, but like, or maybe we can go this way. You can get somebody very, very fit by just doing cyclical work.
Yeah,
doesn't transfer over to the sport.
No,
completely. A little bit, but not completely.
Yeah.
Doing burpees, toes to bar, learning the breathing patterns, learning the muscular efficiency of when you need to relax, contract inside of those movements is completely different than being on a rower. It's the same reason why cyclists have a higher VO2 on a bike than on a treadmill, right? So I feel like if you're trying to do what you're saying, change those neural pathways for a 3-week period, for a 6-week period, you're going to lose the efficiency adaptation, probably honestly by week 3 is when you're going to start to see degradation of.
I won't disagree with that at all.
Of efficiency.
Usually the third week, if you're required in swimming, if you're required to taper for a third week, by the end of the meet, your performance is completely tanked.
Yeah,
I agree with that fully. Now we're not talking about like taper in a form.
Right.
It's tapers like quote unquote CNS taper,
right?
if you will. You make valid points there. That successfully changed my mind.
Okay. Cool.
So like, does that may not seem fully complete, but how does that, like the swimming side of the season structure, like does that fit? Does that answer the question you're asking? Does that fit the conversation?
It does. Yeah, I was just kind of curious about that because CrossFit's like obviously a very performance-based sport, right? Mm-hmm. You have to come in and like everybody is competing as hard as they literally possibly can inside of a weekend to go get a spot at the games. Like you are absolutely trashed at the end of a weekend, or should be. Swimming, I feel like, is a little bit different of a. I think that, so. Like it's a performance sport, but I think there is different components of performance inside of each performance sport.
So
Swimming, I feel like, relies very heavily on technique.
Oh yeah,
as its driver of performance.
Yeah.
Sprinting, I think, is a little bit of a mixed bag between technique and power production or force production.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that at all. But I would encourage putting a greater emphasis on the technique side of it all
In sprinting.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I think maybe it's shaded a little bit more.
I'd say being more aware of how your body is moving in water is number one priority. So being able to...
Oh, I'm talking about sprinting on a track, not in...
Oh, my fault. Okay,
sprinting
my fault.
on a track.
My fault.
Sprinting on a track is a little bit more of a mixed bag between technique and force
Yeah,
production.
I won't disagree with that.
Right.
Like obviously being a runner back in my day. I'll take your word on it.
Yeah. But then you have CrossFit, which is honestly taking... You have to have high levels of technique, and you have to have high levels of force production on various different components. And then you're also throwing in a completely a crazy fatigue factor of like central nervous system fatigue, hormonal fatigue, muscular skeletal fatigue.
You have to be the best mediocre out there.
I mean, you have to be the best at handling different fatigue substrates. Is what I would.
So you have to be the highest degree of the mediocre skill set in every professional sport.
yeah.
That's so mean to say. I'm sorry.
I mean, I think it's I think it's just a different best at something.
Yeah,
you're best at handling different fatigue substrates. Mm-hmm. Sprinters are best at handling central nervous system fatigue substrates.
I like that categorization a lot, actually. That makes sense.
Swimmers are best at handling volume fatigue substrates. Now, I know that's a little.
Swimmers are pussies, man. Like, I'm sorry. Like, we are. Like, we're the biggest bitches you'll ever have on land.
Yeah.
Except for Amber, obviously.
Inland, but you guys put in, like, current training methodology, which is hopefully shifting, is very biased towards volume, or like
to go from semi-pro to pro, it's completely shifted.
Yeah, right.
So it's more land-based training is a requirement.
Okay, so
you have to find the transfer. Like honestly, go ahead. You finish your thought.
Let me get back to the point.
Finish your thought.
So I think it's just a different. CrossFitters are just good at all of it, right?
Yeah,
and so they're the best at handling all different fatigue substrates and being able to recover from them quick enough or be
cool to think about.
efficient enough to be able to produce power throughout the course of the weekend.
It'd be awesome if the body could fully handle that naturally. But I don't personally give a fuck, right? It is what it is.
Yeah.
People like performance, and you still have to put in the work if you're on shit or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was a PED statement that Dan made for those of you that don't get that.
Sorry.
Maybe not go down that route.
No, we're not gonna.
I think this because I think that leads to a completely different route of being able like this it changes how you look at the 8-week structure entirely.
We're looking at the bell curve, like the everyday Jamoke, not everyday Jamoke, but like the everyday Jamoke that wants to be
a semifinal,
a high level,
high level athlete.
So okay, let's in the swimming world for that specifically. You have to train during lunch.
Okay.
You eat your lunch in the car on your way back from the pool.
So hold
right?
on, where are we going with?
So I'm circling it all back to where the semi-pro.
Yeah. Okay. So why is it harder for the semi?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification there. In my mind, it all circled back to it. I'm sure to the people listening, it didn't. I'm not going to speak the younger athletes because they're still driven everywhere by their parents. Like they're provided their food. Yeah. They have a structured schedule in school.
Their hormones are just starting to peak and invincible. And
shit, even then, I mean, let's assume a 26-year-old male, 26 to 34-year-old male, and 21 to 28-year-old female. Is that?
What are you referencing here?
Just hormone shit. Like with how you can peak within that quote unquote range. I mean, I know in the 30s, like it can still peak for women, but men isn't. Correct if I'm wrong. Men,
I think we're going off on a tangent.
Well, right no, it does apply. I promise it applies because in order to qualify for the semis shit in the CrossFit world, in my opinion here, I'm equating to how you got to do it in swimming as well, right? In the season structure.
Yeah.
So for men, just please correct me if I'm wrong. It's like 30 to 34 is when full brain development has happened, right? You're
25 is usually
25 is full brain development, but I mean like
cortex.
Full brain development to have an ego death, right? And then evolve from there, like your paradigm shift of who you are, right? And then couple that with all your hormone irregularities now becoming more hormonally regular, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
For men, it's 25 to 35.
Something like that,
okay.
maybe, yeah.
But they tend to peak in performance like late 20s, early 30s. In the swimming world.
Yeah.
So full-time jobs, most likely fucking single.
From 20, right.
They have to be.
Yeah.
At least in all the athletes that I've coached that have gone from like a decently high-level collegiate swimming career and then gotten faster, there's been only a couple that I know personally that have a family that have really blossomed.
Well, I mean, when I was competing, I wasn't dating anybody until I stopped, basically.
And that's what has to be done.
Right.
And it's but like that is part of the requirement, but when you're already at that point where a lot of these guys have a family most likely, right? Or they are genuinely working a full-time gig, and in this day and age, it's more than a full-time gig.
Yeah.
Right? So in the swimming light, to qualify for quote-unquote semis, and in this case, the master's level probably qualify to medal at the senior state swim meet, long course or short course, or go to like just compete at a nationals meet with people fucking 8 years younger than you, let alone qualify for worlds. You're eating lunch during your lunch. You're training during your lunch break.
Yeah.
You're eating lunch while you're working. You're waking up in the morning to do a yoga session, right? You are monitoring your blood work, but that's in the pool.
Yeah.
You have to structure your training around your work. Therefore, your season approach is going to be the tutor bumpa. You got two.
Yeah, right.
And you get one meet to try to qualify.
Yeah.
But thankfully, like in the swimming world, your times stand for a whole year.
Okay.
Right? And there's the conversion, long course to short course to long course. That's allowed in some states, not every state. So, Kyle, with that, was that a lot of information to provide? Did it fit what you wanted to hear kind of deal?
Yeah,
Relatively vague.
Yeah. What was relatively
what I just said there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think kind of where I wanted to approach this from is a lot of what you said, but maybe just to simplify it down is like when you're not a professional athlete, you don't training is not your job.
Right.
Your job is your job, and training is a hobby. And so it makes it exponentially harder to fit that hobby into your life.
Right, so you have to find the right avenues.
If you have a full-time job. Job is like the big thing, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, there's a dude right now that swims with the Masters team at Kennesaw State that wants to make trials. He's 26 years old, 27 years old. And right now he is fast enough to swim at Nationals.
Okay.
In just the 50. Like, he's a sprinter and then throw up and he's done.
Yeah.
But like he only swims twice a week.
Yeah.
And does weights and yoga and shit outside of that. And he's still as fast as he is.
But the thing is, he's still training.
He is still training. So he has been able to find what works appropriately for him. He's also single.
Yep.
Right? But he works 9 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever. In swimming, in my opinion, it's easier to create the schedule.
Yeah.
But for this,
Because you have multiple different choices on where you're going to go compete and when you're going to go compete. For
It depends on what avenue. So if you want to, we're talking about the semifinals, qualifiers and CrossFit, right? Comparatively speaking.
Yeah.
So that would be the senior state medalist or the national qualifier, maybe make finals.
Okay.
Consolation finals. That's going to be, that's going to be the more Leanna approach type of
what
person.
We did this last year.
Correct.
Where it was like,
or Amy, Leanna or Amy are the two that come to the forefront.
Yeah.
Those two approach, or the John approach, like what, last season or the season previous?
I can't remember.
The one I think it was last year where he fucking slaughtered Fittest of the Coast when he did individual and team. We had more than one people do that, but like where he had significant growth.
Yeah. So I guess for him it was more like he got burnt out.
Gotcha.
Doing that. Yeah.
Well, I guess,
but like
okay.
Leanna, like what we did with Amy and Leanna this year.
Mm-hmm. That's the perfect. I think you should talk about that because that is the perfect fucking fit for what I just said for swimming.
Yeah. So what we did with Amy and Leanna, they both have full-time jobs. Amy's a master's athlete. Leanna just loves CrossFit, wants to see how far she can take it. What we did for them was they both had a competition in January, and then we took those competitions and then we kind of ran them into pretty hard until open and till the open basically. Mm-hmm. And then for 3 weeks, open ended. Masters was a month after. So for Amy, it was for 2 weeks we buried her, like just buried her.
When did you bury her? Like what? At what point did you say?
Right after the open.
Right after.
Gave her a little bit of time off.
Yeah, I think I missed that. I apologize.
So we gave her a little bit of time off, and then it was just full go for 2 weeks after the open, and then we started to taper her into Masters semis. And Liana, we ramped up throughout the course of a 2 month, what was that? Actually, probably closer to 6 weeks before that. So we ramped up for about 4, but we also kind of buried her over those 4 weeks.
Dude, those two, I have to stop you for a second because I have to say this. Amy and Leanna, fucking amazing what they've done, what they did this past year.
Yeah.
Dude, I'll say it to their face every time I see him.
I mean, Amy would have
so proud of them.
Amy would have qualified for Masters if it was previous season.
I'm sorry to stop you there, and I'm sorry to everybody else for stopping it. Dead stop. It's like the Star Wars, when there's Darth Vader's head or whatever. But so fucking proud of them.
Yeah.
Proud of everyone, but those two like really stand out. Go ahead.
So we had kind of like a 6 week build up. Liana was a little bit easier because we weren't worried as much about the open. The thing that happened though was she was very close to a qualifying spot for semifinals coming out of or after the first week of the open, so we were like let's go for it. And we made some dumb decisions during that time frame, but it's kind of like, hey, if you get this qualifying spot in the open, now we have a set date that we can really peak you for and try and go compete at semifinals. She was also dealing with some life stress that kind of wore her out a little bit. Yeah. But so after the open, we gave her some time off, and then we had about 4 or 5 weeks where we just kind of ramped up and buried her. But that was kind of the process. Was what I've seen work very well for most CrossFitters is a 2 week taper.
Interesting. I feel like with. Let me start this with
and maybe we didn't clarify that super well, but like a taper is unbelievably important and one of a very missed aspect, especially with how you do it in the sport to perform at these competitions.
Is CrossFit still considered an endurance sport, or is it finally evolving?
I mean, I think you could classify it as an endurance sport, but it's like an aerobic power endurance. If that makes sense.
I follow. That's why, so I'm surprised that a 2 week taper is appropriate from a bell curve standpoint, because in swimming, completely different.
What is it in swimming?
So the more muscle bound you are, the longer your taper. However, if you're doing a 2 week taper and as a swimmer, you're probably not going to survive the end of the the shave taper meet, the championship meet. Like you're fucking dead on the last day, and you're probably going to go. Your performance, your percentage of improvement is not going to be anywhere close to what it was on like day 2.
Yeah,
it's crazy to me to hear 2-week taper.
Yeah, so I think what happens in CrossFit is just mixed with the intensity, and maybe this is just a training bias that I have, but like, I think the mix of the intensity and the amount of volume required to be really good at this sport, and then you have to couple those two together. Mm-hmm. I think a 2-week taper allows you to, the first week is like the recovery period, and you're kind of feeling like shit, absolute shit.
Yeah, taper blues.
Yep. And then that second week is where your central nervous system starts to kick back on, and you're like primed and ready to go.
So how do you do that with the non-pro, working 9 to 5 or whatever hours, 40 hours a week minimum type of person when their cortisol levels from work are like Amy, she's a teacher. Mm-hmm. Leanna works at the CDC.
Yeah.
Those are high cortisol level jobs.
Super high cortisol level jobs. But again, that's kind of where that 2-week taper comes in, mm-hmm. is we get you in the gym for 45, 60 minutes, and now you get to go home early.
So they have to figure out, well, I'm going to devil's advocate here. Mm-hmm. Let's say it happens at a time where, I don't know, Amy's kids are being little shits, and her admin is not supporting her. Leanna, it's another COVID situation, and she's got to do her thing. I don't really remember what she does at the CDC, but the fact of the matter is, like, general population be like, hey, fuck you work at the CDC.
Basically, what happens if your job stress is super high?
Yeah, that was an easier way to say what I just did.
Yeah. So,
sorry.
Your body can only handle so much stress, mm-hmm. right? So, if you happen to have high stress during a taper period, it's best. That's the best time, maybe the best time to have it, because now you're out of the gym even more. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. So you don't think that they have to use the gym then as like their outlet to lower their stress?
I think that is complete bullshit, and people are just relying on the stress hormones to block off the other cortisol that they're feeling or give them a little bit of a boost. I don't think that I don't think that the gym is your happy place. I think it's another stressor,
yeah.
And you're just addicted to stress.
I hope that AI cuts this. And like, this is the fuck. That's the trailer right there, man.
I think that statement is complete bullshit.
That's
Look,
fair.
if you want to live it, that's fine, and
yeah.
I'll help you try and understand that. But I think that's complete bullshit. You're just addicted to stress. You're addicted to cortisol. You're addicted to epinephrine, and you're trying to continue to live that lifestyle. And because you're changing the stress stimulus a little bit, you get a new bump.
But what if it helps you? What if it causes you to ejaculate during a session? And that's,
I don't know.
Like Arnold Schwarzenegger said.
I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Another topic conversation. So.
But again, okay, so going back to cortisol, right? Like, to have high levels of performance, your cortisol levels have to be regulated. If they're higher at work, we have to bring them down in the gym, especially during a taper.
How do you do that?
So getting them out of the gym, doing easier work, like zone 1 work, movement work, maybe light volume.
Give me specific examples, like with Amy and Leanna, two different people,
yeah.
two different structures.
Yeah, Leanna's a little bit more challenging because she needs a lot of intensity touches to create adaptation, and Amy is a little bit more powerful. So she just needs kind of a little bit easier work, and if we bring down the volume for her, she's usually pretty good to go. But like Amy, a zone 1 session would be something like a flow session. So you bike 2 minutes at 120 BPM or less, and then you go into 3 rounds of like some animal walks and some kettlebell arm bars, just some movement work. And then you do another cyclical machine, and then you do some more movement work. And you do that for 20
That'd be for Amy.
20 to 30 minutes. That'd be like a easy day for Amy. Like, that's a very easy day.
Sure.
Yeah. Right? We're probably doing some lifting in the taper at like 70%. On the first week, I'll probably have her build up to some tough singles for stuff, and then I'll give her some...
70% sounds pretty high.
70%? Yeah, CrossFitters, I think, are artificially lowered percentage-wise in general from their true 1RMs.
Gotcha. I was devil's advocating you for the listeners.
Oh, fair. I think CrossFitters are just artificially dampened from true 1RMs because of the training volume that they put in.
Makes sense.
So 70% I think is like a pretty fair assessment. Obviously, if you work with the athlete a little bit longer, you can figure out like, okay, this person needs 60%, maybe this person needs 50%. But yeah, so we'll get some lifting in. Usually the first week I'll do kind of some tough singles, try and get a little bit of pop in their central nervous system, make sure that they're kind of like used to the weights. They definitely don't hit any PRs that week. Like it's just getting you touches on feeling the weight.
Yeah.
And then in the week leading up to the competition where we're kind of hitting the taper like even more aggressive, then it's like 70%. On Wednesday, I might have you build to something heavy, just so you get a little bit more of a pop in the CNS. But then day before comp, it's an easy flush, like what I talked about previously with Amy, and you're not lifting anything heavier than 70%, and all of your intensity, for Amy specifically, is like 2 minutes or less.
Gotcha. Now what about Leanna?
Leanna's a little bit more challenging because she adapts. She has to adapt via high levels of intensity just because of her endurance background.
Right.
And she needs a little bit more volume.
So what would be a zone 1 day for her?
We would do more zone 2. And I actually, because she has such a high training age, I let her, I'll just have her go on runs and let her dictate what she needs to. She's very
smart when it comes to that.
She's
she knows
smart
her body.
and she's in tune with her body. Yeah. If she wasn't as in tune with her body, we would kind of leave it a little bit more zone 2-esque. So, I think a great one is the Maffetone. So 180 minus your age for your zone 2 work or aerobic work. So we'd put that on her. She's 32, 33, so that I think that comes out to be 147 roughly beats per minute. Yeah, something like that. So pretty much I just keep it easy, 145 beats per minute, and then we would give her probably some more CrossFit stuff, especially because her training age in the sport is lower than a lot of other people, and she's because she didn't play sports growing up, she needs a little bit more touches on things to keep that central nervous system feel. So it might be something like you put her on a bike at 145 BPM for 2 minutes, and then we go do a ring complex of like 4 beat swings, 2 hips to ring, 1 ring muscle up, and then maybe 10 dumbbell power cleans at 20 pounds. So something that's not going to spike her or get her like overly fatigued, but it's going to keep the central nervous system of tone there for all the touches on the sport. That's
so cool to be involved. I mean, to us, it's common sense, but like to be that involved with your quote unquote your athlete or just an athlete in general. You don't even need a muscle biopsy to see how shit works, or even put a Moxie monitor on them. Or
I used to be a big fan of the science side of the sport, and I think it's so overdone.
The science side?
Yeah.
Science
just tells you how behind things. It doesn't tell you the why. Like,
true.
You can figure out enough about your athlete watching and observing and working with them that you don't need to send, okay, now go do a VO2 test, and then we're going to run all your intervals off of a VO2, off of your VO2 max. Lactate threshold, I think, is actually a little bit more of a valuable,
it shows
valuable thing to use.
That'll show a lot of metabolic efficiency,
right? Well, and I think most of the high level athletes, the Science of Running is a great book. If you guys have never,
that is a phenomenal book.
They talk about how the VO2 max is an oversimplified and overused metric, and that lactate threshold is actually the bigger indicator of higher performers. So I think lactate threshold is a little bit more of a better number to get. It's just very hard to like.
So I'm giggling because it was said to me one time the VO2 max is like the BMI.
Yeah, very fair. Very fair. Yeah, very fair.
Which I think is not too inaccurate.
No, yeah. But it's just,
at least in this day and age.
Yeah. But I think it's hard for the lactate threshold in the sport because you have a multitude of lactate thresholds. You have lactate thresholds from a row to a wall ball workout. You have lactate thresholds from upper body pressing to upper body pulling workout. You have lactate thresholds from a lower pole to an upper pole to a 400-meter run or running interval. So because the sport's chaos, it's a little bit harder to work at lactate thresholds because it changes for every movement as well.
And I think that not to give too many props here, but I think that Kyle Ruth is very much onto something in that regard with all the the cuffs, the blood flow restriction cuffs and whatnot. How he is applying it specifically.
Yeah, I haven't done a ton of research into like what the
right. Well, we don't need to go down the route.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just saying. I think with reference to what you're saying. It's a cool thing to wear because that could be helpful for somebody who struggles to maintain a type of structure for a season. They can do shit at home with those cuffs on and replicate shit because there is the data on it now. It started coming out in 2020, 2021, I believe. The data on it now is very promising and it's pretty cool. And that's not me trying to curtail the conversation or give props. It's something to have a conversation about with an athlete.
It's something you can potentially throw into a taper as a taper tool.
Well, a taper tool, but also like as a training tool during the however you want, but to meet your needs for your season.
Yeah.
Now look, that's a stretch. I admit that. Okay, and I hope that
maybe we can go off of this tangent because I think there is a time and place for BFR cuffs. But I mean, I think that's a whole other podcast on
100%
what they actually do and like what the research is on them. But I think as an overarching like principle for BFR cuffs, I think the big driver that they allow you to do is handle less intensity and a little bit less in volume and get the same stimulus out of them.
100%. And like, look, I need to say this. I'm not trying to tangent or anything. It is applicable, and it is a different episode, 100%. I feel it'd be inappropriate if I didn't at least mention, like, hey, the 9 to 5, 40-plus hour, trying to get to the semi-level, it is a possibility, especially if, like, God forbid, cortisol levels hit a peak unnecessarily outside of the 8 weeks.
Yeah.
You have to find something.
Yeah, like, again, they're a tool, right?
Yeah.
They're a tool. So there is a time and place to use them, but... I think,
it'd be a fun conversation with your coach to see if it fits your season structure to help. Look, I promise I'm speaking to where all this shit does fit within a season structure.
Yeah.
I want to say like to close on that because
I mean, we kind of hit on the taper and like now we're getting back into like the season. Like you need to have a taper before you go into these events, right?
We're on the same page.
Yeah. So
when you've established your taper already, the non-pro wanting to achieve semifinals, they follow the structure that look, my opinion, like you've laid out. Okay, I've laid out a swimming, quote unquote, equivalent.
Yeah.
And what I've come to find more interestingly is, in both cases, without saying it directly, we've identified one major thing: the two areas in which need to be qualified for, or like when the qualification periods need to happen,
right,
and then developing around that. So you said identify that. Well, indirectly we said identify that, identify the taper, how we're going to get there, and the most unique thing I came to find is like I'm talking about swimming, and we can lump in grid here in a moment as well because it does apply within that short range minus last year, that short range of like needing a peak and perform. The 2-week taper for you, I'll say max week and a half taper for me in swimming. The zone 1 type of shit to maintain feel and then properly recommend for quote unquote said athlete. It doesn't matter the age, but I'll use like 15. That's when you start developing a high performance in swimming. You just do hey, I've identified you are this. You fit this spectrum or this realm in the pool. You feel like shit. Your cortisol levels are high. We're going to hit zone 1 or zone 2 and maintain a feel for the most appropriate thing for your race.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So like that to me is a badass crossover, being a buoyancy sport with people who can't function on land versus a land-based sport that can't function in water.
Right. Yeah. Polar opposites.
Yep, with a swim event coming up. It's going to be fun.
Yeah,
so finally.
I think it's just maybe like wrapping this all together, and I do kind of want to touch on some couple other things here, but like wrapping this all together I think is more than ever now, especially with World Fitness Project like happening and it being potentially it's going to be a bigger payout than the games for most people.
Really?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later. That's cool. That's good to know.
Yeah. Well, it's just, is it sustainable is the question. So, it's super important for you to have an idea of what you're going to try and qualify for and when you're going to qualify for those things. Or, sorry, what you're going to qualify for or compete at throughout the year. And because of kind of the structure of this, it's going to have to be a lot of last-minute decisions. Mm-hmm. A lot of people qualified for Mayhem Classic through the Open, and so it's a last-minute decision of whether you want to go and do that or not. But if you're qualifying for some of these competitions, i.e., and this is kind of like, I mean, I think this could be said for a lot of sports, but
in swimming for sure, you got state into nationals,
right,
less than 4-day turnaround,
right. So, I think as things evolve, you need to be okay with cutting other things out.
Yes,
and CrossFitters are a little bit more loss adverse when it comes to big competitions because, one, they're fun as fuck and they're just very damaging on your body. Mm-hmm. And you have to really make a decision on what is best for you to reach your ultimate goal, if it's going to the games or performing your best possible at one of these things. Mm-hmm. And then be okay with having some fall off somewhere else if you're not willing to give something else up, if that makes sense.
Makes 100% sense.
And this even goes back to, and I think this is where another kind of aspect that I wanted to take this podcast was, your season structure doesn't just start in January. It starts the day after your last competition.
Yeah.
And to kind of reference Amy and Leanna's, we had them doing a complete off season for a month. They hardly touched any intensity for a month. And they did a lot of skill work and prep work. We also sat down and came up with a goal for what competitions we were doing throughout the course of the year. And I think this is one of the hard things for semifinal and like newer athletes in the sport, especially just CrossFitters in general, is they just squirrel the shit out of their season structure, and they don't plan ahead at all. They just kind of play things on a whim. And so what ends up happening is June rolls around, you get 3 friends that ask you if you want to do Wadapalooza in August, the South Beach one.
Yeah.
And then you have another friend that asks you to do a competition 2 weeks from now. Looks like some fun workouts, so you go and do it. Then you're like, oh, man, World Fitness Project's going on right now. I'm going to jump into those and do those qualifiers. And then in September, you're like, oh, I'm already – or then you maybe you qualify for World Fitness Project, and then you're going to World Fitness Project, and then you're competing in September at Wadapalooza, and then you're like, oh, man, Wadapalooza in Miami is coming around, or maybe Fittest of the Coast, and then I'm going to go do this other beach brawl competition. And you end up just being like comp. And then your actual season rolls around, which kind of does start in January timeframe, and you're like, wow, I'm fucking tired. And so this is where I think it's super important, while it is very annoying, to be disciplined enough to sit down at the start of your year and be like, I want to make it to X, Y, and Z competitions. And if somebody asks me to do something and it does not align with that goal, I'm going to be disciplined and tell them no.
I like that. But you have to do that.
But it starts with sitting down and thinking ahead and actually thinking about what you want your season structure to be.
Yep.
Are you going to be most disappointed missing out on semifinals, or are you going to be most disappointed missing out on beach brawl, Fittest of the Coast?
Partying with your friends.
No, I'm referring to competitions.
Sorry.
Most
I'm
people,
sorry.
Most people are like more trained than that. But you have to sit down and kind of come to realizations and think about that and really understand what you want to do through the year. Mm-hmm. Some people might just want to wing it and have fun and see what happens.
Yeah.
But when you do that, you also have to understand that there's a high probability that you're going to miss out on a competition you genuinely care most about, maybe unknowingly, and you are probably going to get burnt out faster.
Yeah, good point. That's a tough thing to identify as an adult and be open to it.
What?
All that shit you just said. To be like,
Oh,
really say no.
say no. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, so like
Women
when
are
I
used
when
to
I was
it.
when I was competing, I
It's a
did
joke.
when I was competing, I did Granite Games. I did the Open when the Open was stressful. Bree and I talked about this on the last podcast. And then I did regionals, and if we qualified for the games, we did the games. But by the time we got to the games, I was fucking done, like done. So
It's a long season.
Yeah, very long season. But I only did roughly 3 to 4 competitions a year. That's it. Like no more than that. And there was one year where we went open regionals, missed out by a spot, got super pissed, didn't take an off season, just trained through the season, qualified for the games the following year, and then went all the way to August, and I was fucking smoked by the time we got to the games. Like, so, but I was an idiot, lesson learned, didn't take an off season, just literally the Tuesday after regionals, I was back in the gym doing crazy volumes.
They say you're allowed one mistake in your life, and you made it how many years?
Maybe one.
Well, I mean, when you were fucking dumb when you made it to the games. How old were you?
24 and 26.
Hey man, that's a good
Made a lot
more
more
run
mistakes than that.
I know.
So, yeah. So I think people are gonna run into that issue next year because of how much competing they're doing right now. If that makes sense.
Makes complete sense, man.
So,
makes complete sense. Did you want to talk about grid at all with reference to season structure and stuff, or how did you want to close on that? If you even did want to, because right now,
where are we at?
I have no idea.
Seems like a while.
It's noon 33, so a little over an hour.
Maybe we can wrap that up and then do a second podcast, a short one.
Whatever.
Okay. Sweet.
That was it.
Yeah, we can end on that.
Okay. Jeez, it's like The Sopranos.
Never saw it, but
well, we can just cut it off mid-sent.
No. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe.
Give a moment of silence for Yana.
Thank you. Please let us know if you have any questions on this. If you guys, I think there's a lot of information that we threw at you guys there. If you guys need a little bit more kind of breakdown, maybe you're a visual learner and you need to see some graphics on this stuff.
Be happy to do that.
We'd be super happy to help you out with that. So please reach out. But yeah, we'll catch you guys next time here.
Peace. You gotta go pee?
Oh yeah. 107. I actually